Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I know I saw some of you a short while ago in the court appearance for People versus Harvey Weinstein. We are moving forward in that matter. We intend to retry it, and for those of you who were in court saw that the court set sort of a window for a trial in the fall. So we are already moving forward with that matter, having conversations with survivors, centering their well-being, and pursuing justice. We are here now because the work of the office goes on in so many ways. As those of you who cover the office know, the breadth of our work, and that work continues. We have the expertise and resources to take on tough cases while driving down crime alongside our law enforcement partners. That includes, over the past 2 years, driving shootings down 48% in Manhattan, murders down 17%, burglary down 31%, and overall index crimes down 7%, outpacing the citywide decline of 0.6%. There's more work to do, which is why we're here today to talk to you about this matter, which affects housing and our public safety. I want to start by thanking a couple of our team members who are on their way from court. So maybe actually I will thank them in absentia, but the chief of our housing and tenant protection unit. Actually, I'm going to wait. I'm going to re-thank them at the end. So I will thank our other law enforcement partners, our great commissioner of the Department of Investigation. And I smile because we have such a warm partnership across a number of areas, and so many things that we do we could not do. And I do want you to see the team that has really built this great case alongside D.O.I. There in court coming back from the arraignment. So I will introduce you to them when they arrive. Safe and affordable housing, quite simply, is a public safety issue. When New Yorkers experience housing instability, they're often pushed to the brink, which can lead to poverty, homelessness, and crime. In Manhattan, as many of you know, we are in the midst of a housing crisis with sky-high rents, meaning tenants have few options, and unscrupulous landlords looking to take advantage. And too often, that looks like what the photos depict here. Broken doors and locks, letting anyone walk right into someone's home. Entryways shrouded in darkness because the electricity was turned off. And extensive leaks that cause structural damage, leading to the collapse of multiple ceilings, including one on top of a toddler in his very own bedroom. When a tenant sent a video to the defendant of her ceiling full of water, this is depicted to the left here, leaking and about to break open, the defendant responded by saying he should poke a hole in it. Text down here. Luckily, instead, she decided to call the fire department. And when the fire department arrived, they touched the tear. The ceiling collapsed immediately. The fire department told her this was an emergency, unsafe, and indeed shocking, and that it needed to be fixed immediately. The defendant, in stark contrast, showed absolutely no concern, no urgency, only sending someone to nail a plywood board over the hole. And that's depicted here, just some of the evidence in this investigation. These are horrific conditions. We allege the defendant knowingly and purposely refused to correct in a concentrated effort to harass his rent-stabilized tenants in at least 5 buildings in Manhattan. Harassment that was intended to drive them out when they could no longer bear the decrepit state of their own homes. Harassment that would eventually turn into, as the defendant hoped, a huge profit when the buildings were empty of our fellow New Yorkers and therefore easier to sell. To that end, we allege he forced his tenants to live in unthinkable conditions, long periods without heat or hot water in the middle of the winter, especially during the holidays, inadequate security to prevent squatters from using vacant apartments for criminal activity, and many, many more violations. Accordingly, the defendant is charged in a New York Supreme Court indictment with multiple counts of harassment of a rent-regulated tenant, a first in New York State following the law's relatively recent enactment, as well as endangering the welfare of a child. His conduct did not stop there, we allege. He is also charged with inducing two individuals to sign documents that were filed with HPD, our local housing agency, falsely certifying responsibility for his buildings and that the violations had been corrected. By doing so, he allegedly insulated himself from the consequences of dangerously neglecting his buildings. He and his companies face, for that alleged conduct, numerous charges of offering a false instrument for filing. The multiple layers of LLCs combined with individuals who signed documents but in fact had no connection to the buildings made it nearly impossible for tenants to know who to go to for help. Many of them band together to clean their own properties and address their safety concerns themselves, demonstrating the heart and determination of true New Yorkers, but they should not have had to. The onus is on landlords and property owners to keep their tenants' homes safe. Here, we allege the defendant shirked that responsibility time and time again and to the detriment of his tenants. To close, I want to elaborate on my earlier point about housing. Secure housing is a human right. It's also key to our safety. So our ongoing housing and tenant protection work isn't just about doing the right thing. It is about these tenants' safety and indeed all of our safety. Frequent evictions and high turnover means people don't know their neighbors. They don't know who lives in the building and who doesn't. Units that stay vacant may be taken over by people looking for a place to commit crime, and we have seen that. So protecting rent-stabilized tenants protects them and their families, but equally as important, it protects all of us. So here at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, along with our law enforcement partners, we are dedicated to protecting Manhattanites from systemic criminal activity among landlords and developers, from patterns of criminal harassment to fraud of government programs to deed theft. If you're aware of these kind of circumstances, we urge you to call our Housing and Tenant Protection Unit at 212-335-3300 or email dannyhousing@danny.nyc.gov. And through this work, we make our safeties and communities safer and more equitable. So I thank you, and I see we were joined, my peripheral vision is working well, by our team that was in court. Hope Korenstein, the Deputy Chief of the Financial Frauds Bureau, and he was here earlier, I didn't introduce him, Kofi Sanscott, the Chief of the Financial Frauds Bureau, and Chike Ibabuche, the Chief of our office's Housing and Tenant Protection Unit. So I want to thank them for their leadership and their great work on this, and then I want to turn the podium over to my colleague and our stalwart law enforcement partner, Commissioner Strauber.
Thank you, Alvin. Good afternoon. No one should have to live in the conditions that the defendant landlord tenants endured as alleged in the indictment. The city has a range of options to address derelict landlords who violate the city's building and housing maintenance codes. But when landlords fail to remedy those violations, creating unlivable and dangerous conditions that persist despite the city's efforts, and especially where, as here, there is allegedly evidence that a landlord's neglect is part of an intentional effort to push out rent-regulated tenants, we will not hesitate with our partners to pursue criminal charges. As the district attorney explained, his office's Housing and Tenant Protection Unit was created to target criminal harassment of tenants by unscrupulous landlords, filling a critical need in New York City, where a majority of residents rent their homes and approximately half live in rent-regulated apartments. DOI is proud to be a partner in that effort. This investigation developed, in part, from DOI's work in 2022 with the City Department of Housing Preservation and Development, known as HPD, to conduct inspections of buildings and to ensure compliance with the city's self-closing door regulations, which help prevent fires and smoke from spreading. We began these inspections after a fatal fire in a high-rise building, Twin Parks Northwest, unrelated to this case, failed to follow those regulations. DOI and HPD focused inspections on buildings with extensive violations of the Housing Maintenance Code, which led investigators to the defendant's buildings. At some of those buildings, DOI observed conditions including rodent infestations, broken windows, and defective doors, leading HPD to issue various code violations. Those conditions, as well as others, including lack of heat and hot water in the winter, persistent leaks, and inadequate security leading to criminal activity in building common areas, are alleged in the indictment filed today. As is also alleged, the defendant sought to protect himself from the consequences of his misconduct by making false filings with HPD concerning the true ownership of his buildings. When landlords fail to provide true and accurate information about their properties, their actions hinder HPD's ability to protect tenants by promptly pursuing administrative remedies for housing code violations. It is also important to note that prior to this indictment, HPD and the city brought many motions for contempt and civil penalties against this defendant and his properties for failure to comply with court orders to correct housing code violations. When the defendant persisted in his refusal to comply as to two of his properties on 170th Street in Manhattan, HPD sought and obtained a warrant for his arrest for civil contempt of court, resulting in his incarceration. Now, in all of our investigations, and particularly where, as here, the investigation raises serious public safety concerns, DOI considers whether policy and procedural reforms are warranted. And to that end, DOI has issued today several recommendations to HPD intended to strengthen its response to landlords who persistently neglect their properties. These recommendations include more frequent pursuit of court-ordered remedies, in particular contempt findings and arrests of landlords where warranted, more stringent registration and disclosure requirements to enable HPD to accurately identify building owners, and additional staff to handle all aspects of the inspection and violation process. We have copies of these recommendations with us, which include more detail about our proposals, and we will post them to DOI's website today. HPD is seriously considering these proposals, and I thank them for their cooperation in this investigation. I also want to thank, in addition to the entire team that worked this case here at the District Attorney's Office, in particular, ADA and Chief of the Housing and Tenant Protection Unit, Chike Ibabuche, Manhattan DA Detective Investigator Samuel Morales, and Senior Financial Investigator Lana Wong, who worked this case with DOI. And at DOI, I want to recognize the outstanding work of Special Investigator Emily Caswell, Deputy Inspector General Parvati Persad Tran, and Inspector General Michael Morris. Thank you.